to our surprise, was pulling an oxygen tank. Yes. And in between conversation, I want to set up a trust.
The banks will be knocking on your door. And who is going to pay for the monthly installment? And everybody will be so stressed out, and they will start to sell off whatever the founder has created.
And sometimes because of these delays, the wealth keeps growing so much more faster than your decision making. Of the Grandtag podcast, conversations on wealth and legacy. Welcome back to the Grandtag podcast, conversations on wealth and legacy. I'm Barbara, Director for Business Development at Grandtag Financial Consultancy Singapore. Today, we explore a topic that is quietly reshaping the global financial landscape, the Great Wealth Transfer. Over the next 20 to 25 years, trillions of dollars will move from one generation to the next. But this transition is not merely about money changing hands. It is about stewardship, responsibility, governance, and the preservation of family values across generations. At Grandtag, we work closely with high net worth and ultra high net worth families who understand that transferring wealth is easy, but transferring wisdom, unity, and intention requires deliberate planning and open communication. To unpack this, I'm honored to be joined by two very experienced voices. First, David Quay, CEO of British and Malayan Holdings. He will be sharing the trustee perspective. And Clement T, Senior Director at Grandtag Financial Consultancy Singapore, bringing in the client advisory perspective. David, Clement, it is an honor to have you as my guests today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me as well.
Okay, let's start off with talking about the scale of this great wealth transfer. David, when we speak about the great wealth transfer, the numbers are staggering, isn't it?
Yes, it is. If you look at some of the latest publications, just in Asia alone, it is predicted that, wealthy Asians are likely to bequeath something close to at least US 2.3 trillion to their heirs by the year 2030. We're talking about 4 or 5 years from now.
So that's such a huge statistic. But more than that, I'm sure there's more than just this number. And what does it actually mean to the families that we serve here in Asia?
Yeah, I'm sure. So if you put that in perspective, some numbers that's coming out of the United States, that number is something like close to 33 trillion. And what we're talking about is this is Gen Zs that is going to inherit or receive wealth transfer from the baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, to the Gen Zs, which their population age today is anywhere between 10 to 20 years old.
Wow. It's like winning the jackpot. So am I right to say that it's a transition usually from founder-led control to these, new generation?
What we're talking about is the first gen, the second gen owners of businesses or families, right? As part of the succession, you find that typically in Asia, the chairman of the company, getting older, will probably nominate and, confer the CEO position to the son. The daughter could be the CFO. And I've seen many cases in Asia, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem lies is that they are not passing over the shares that the family owns in the company. It's giving the authority for the next generation to run and operate the company.
Mm-hmm.
That stops there for now. What we're talking about is people need to start thinking about legacy, estate planning, wealth transfer, the real succession.
Mm-hmm.
Giving them positions in the companies is the first step.
It's just a title anyway.
Yeah, it's the next step. When one passes away, when the patriarch or the matriarch passes away, are there proper plans in place, whether by wills or by trusts, to determine who gets what in terms of the shares of the company?
Do you have any analogy? Because it seems so overwhelming.
Yeah.
Maybe put it into another perspective.
Yeah. Let me give you an analogy that I commonly use when I speak to clients, okay? So imagine there is a person that has been operating a bus company. He is the same person that drives the bus every day, sets where the roots is, and is the owner of the bus.
Mm.
And as the patriarch gets older, he may appoint the son, who's much younger than him, to say, hey, son, you can take over running the company, running the bus, and so forth, right? And what stops there is that the owner has not passed the ownership of the bus to the son yet, but the son has to do all the work, right? Now, take for example, should the person pass away, the father, okay, and let's say under the will, and when the family reads the will and finds out that the ownership of the bus, the title of the bus is given to the daughter and not to the son who's been running the bus for so many years, can you imagine the fights begin? That's a very simple analogy.
So it creates increased complexity. It's not just passing on. And even if the family members have been involved all the way, it's already going to be a different dynamic when the transition actually happens.
Yeah. So when we talk about complexity, when one is planning its wealth transfer and legacy planning, there's issues like cross-border assets. Not all the assets are in one country.
Yeah, you're right.
Blended families. And what I mean by blended families, you may start off with having 2 children, but when the children get married, the blended family gets extended. You got in-laws coming to play. And if the children, after marrying, having kids, so you can see that the blended family, starting out with just 2 kids, now becomes, a much bigger number to deal with, right? And then some of the kids are also will be in terms of global mobility. You may send your daughter to Australia. She's a Singapore resident or a Singapore citizen now. She might get married in Australia, and suddenly, your daughter, who could be the beneficiary of your assets, becomes an Australian citizen, or the son becomes a US person. So when you start planning in terms of a trust or the delivery of who's going to get what, who is going to be the beneficiary, one has to take into account the tax implications of the beneficiaries.
Mm-hmm. And not just that, because in the past, the owners of this wealth right now, they didn't really have whatever their children have right now. And of course, they want a better future and a better life for their kids. But there's a disconnect because maybe the first gen who's owning the wealth right now, they're aging and they belong to another mindset, another set of values as well. And when you pass on this wealth, there's also a shift in dynamics. Maybe how it has been running, let's say, because most of these are family businesses,
Yes.
wealth from the family business. And the values will be experiencing a transfer as well.
Yeah. Let me just say that if you look at a multitude of all the rich Asians, the high net worth individual, a majority of them, 70 to 80%, are business owners, right? Some were born with a silver spoon, so they got inheritance and so forth. We were just chatting, Clement and I, in the waiting room. We were saying, the generation that perhaps Clement and I are in, okay, is different from the current generation, our children. I think we both agree that the younger generation feels that they're entitled, whereas the older generation, were faced with having to deal with the creation of the wealth.
Yes.
Our parents and our grandparents faced war and hunger before. The younger generation has never faced that before. In fact, I always kid to my children, the biggest concerns of the younger generation is that there's no Wi-Fi and my battery is dying in terms of my devices. But my personal view is that in Singapore, when you talk about wealth management, there's only 3 phases. Phase 1 is the creation of wealth. And this is, businessmen having their own startup business, or the second and third generation continuing to run the family business. Or like I said earlier on, unless you're born with a silver spoon, you got a good inheritance. That's when the wealth is created. The second phase is once the wealth is created, you have to manage that. And this is where every private banker, every asset manager, every financial planner will help you with the management of the wealth that has been created. The last phase of wealth management is really, we're all going to die one day. Are we going to leave it to chance as to who is going to receive the transfer of the wealth? And this is where legacy and estate planning is very important. And unfortunately, in Asia, there was a survey done recently by Asian private banker. Only 40% of high net worth families have done the legacy planning or are in the midst of doing so. In the Western world, that number is something like 70%. Yeah. And in terms of wills, not everybody needs a trust. There was a recent survey done by New Straits Times that, in Singapore alone, only 48% have got wills done.
Even with the ongoing public service announcements to encourage everybody to do so.
Yeah, that's very important. That's what the government is trying, recognizes that, okay? And therefore, they're providing some services, some learning towards some awareness that, legacy and estate planning is very crucial.
True.
Don't leave it to chance.
So I see you've been describing that there are different phases of wealth. And it's really a journey, from one generation to the next. But also at Grandtag, we see and we know that wealth preservation starts well before any transfer happens, right? There's nothing to transfer if you don't preserve it, isn't it? So, Clement, from this perspective, what are the blind spots that the families usually tend to have, when it comes to this?
Yeah. As for me, I've been on the ground, meeting up with all the high net worth customers, families, have such a talk. And the underestimate part that we are talking about is more to the emotional as well as the relational kind of dynamics.
Absolutely.
All right. The lack of clarity, documented kind of instructions that they want to do, over reliance on the informal kind of verbal. I will explain in a short while all these pointers, as well as the liquidity and the equalization. Let's start off with the emotional part. Now, a lot of families thinking that just doing up a will or doing up a trust is a documentation exercise. But the fact remains that they did not look into the emotional part of things. Each family members has their own expectation. And one may be expecting to run the business, like what David had just shared. And another one may be not the one that is going to run the business. And he'll be expecting what is the value, right? Expected value that equivalent to the person who is running the business. So again, these are all the unspoken thing that the family members would, the founder may have think that I've done very well, I've planned it very well, but actually it is not being discussed in depth.
No communication.
Yeah, no communication, yes. And the other side will be the assumption, right? Some of them, they'll assume that they have a plan for the children very, very well. And because the children did not bring up any issues, they'll think that everything is all okay.
Oh, so the lack of communication is because sometimes, they know already.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And the best thing is that it's also sometimes verbally during the dinner time they talk about it, and then that's about all.
In
right?
passing.
I'm just okay. I remembered that I have a client that I remembered it very well that the conversation was that, oh, don't worry, I already told them what to do, and that's it, right? But it's not well documented. It's not documented, and it's open up for interpretation as well, right? Different people from the family members to interpret it wrongly or differently. And lastly, but more to the liquidity part, right? As well as when, a lot of them that I come across are very asset rich. They are all illiquid. And when things happen,
and you don't know when things will happen.
Liquidity is very, very important, right? Yeah. So this is something that I think most of the families that I've met, and they are all very, very well-to-do. They love their family so much. However, this part of it, the communication part and the well-documented part, has not been put in place.
Communication breakdown, assumption, expectation, lack of liquidity. They say that liquidity is often this overlooked risk. And it's a glaring thing because it's one of the biggest risks when it comes to wealth transition. Is because of this, there can be an instance of forced asset liquidation, especially in business owning families. So
Agree.
that's such a pain, the first generation works so hard, experience all the kind of hardship just to be able to build the wealth and to be able to, in their mind, oh, I've set this up as my legacy and to make sure that my loved ones will have a brighter and better future. But why is liquidity planning so, centrally unstructured or not really thought out of?
Yeah,
What
bro,
do you
you
observe?
hit the right point here. It's like a lot of them thinking that they are well to do, so they have enough. Now the thing is that having more liquidity will give them more options, right? And very importantly is that when things happen, there will be, for example, tax, right? Expenses. This where what is enough may not turn out to be enough as well,
Correct.
right? And having a liquidity is like give the family members more option in order to do more to address to whatever they need to do, and more importantly is also that the liquidity part will come in when different expectation of value. Now, a person who is the founder has gave it to the elder son to run the family business. The person who is not running the business will expect it to say that, hey, what is my share then? The business is worth so much, and what you give it to me is just so much, is not enough, right?
Yes.
So that's where liquidity will come in a very, very good form to equalize the whole distribution as well. And also funding of business, right? The real challenge comes in when you are lack of liquidity and the business is something that the founder has be very, very close to the heart and built with his own two hands.
Yes.
He don't want it to be sold, but
Yes.
because of such thing that last minute liquidity needed to address to some other obligations,
Correct.
they have to sell those assets that the founder has brought it in all this while, and it's not what exactly he wanted all this while. So these are things that is very, very tricky, and that's where I felt that liquidity is something that a lot of families should be looking into.
And the discussion should start happening now.
Agree. And smart families always focus on the liquidity part. The smart families are those that they know that they want a continuity. They want a smooth transition of in the event that he or she is no more around, that the family members do not fight over things, do not sell off what the core assets are, and also have ensure that there's unity within the family. Right? We have seen a lot of cases, I believe David can vouch for it as well, that they fight over every single cent, right? So this is something that I felt that the liquidity part is something that a lot of families should be looking at.
And from a trust standpoint, I think when you start talking to the families about liquidity, generational transitions, what are the insights that you have on this?
Let me give you an example. And Clement raised a very important point, liquidity. Let me get to the basics, okay? Let's say the father is the sole bread earner for the family, okay? And let's say he passes away. Did you all know that the bank account will be frozen by the bank until the probate is issued? Which means that the wife could also be the signatory and it's got ATM card. That account will be frozen. Because under a trust, once the trust is set up, that bank account can be captured under the trust.
Yeah.
The trustee will write to the bank and says, this is now under the trust. So if the settler passes away, the account can still be operated. The wife can still talk to the relationship manager at the bank. You can still operate the account. That's the very basics of the difference between, if you have a will versus a trust. I've seen so many cases, you heard so many cases before where someone passes away, another family quickly runs to the bank's ATM machine, withdraw the cash before the bank freezes
goodness.
it. That's the one classic case. It's the
But
plain
it all
liquidity.
depends on how much can you redraw.
Exactly.
Are you able
One
to
day
address-
maximum is 2,000, whatever the case may be. That's the very essence of liquidity.
Yes.
Forget about the bigger companies' liquidity. That
The immediate cash
that
need.
strikes to the heart of the to the family who's grieving upon knowing the death of the loved one,
Yes.
and you got no cash.
Yep.
Right.
And
So
the assets,
in-
to add on to what David just said, assets that is under loan, right?
Yeah.
The banks will be knocking on your door.
Oh no.
Yeah.
And who is going to pay for the monthly installment,
Yeah.
right? Everything will come to a standstill and everybody will be so stressed up and they will start to sell off whatever the founder has created and they just sell it off at a low price.
Okay,
to meet
let
up
me
to
give
the
you a simple example. Father sends the son to UK for studies.
Mhm.
This is a student, okay? They come from a wealthy family, okay? So the father buys an apartment in the UK under the father's name, gets a bank loan.
Right.
The son gets to stay in the apartment in London.
Nice.
Father passes away, right? Now, if you follow the UK law, and in the will, it says, I bequeath that London apartment to my son, who's 17, 18 years old, still studying without income. Here lies the problem. To follow the intentions and wishes of the father to transfer the ownership of the apartment, the
Apartment.
thing, it will not be possible because the bank has a mortgage on the apartment.
Okay.
The bank is going to say, who's going to pay that loan outstanding?
And in UK, there's even a timeline for you to do that.
Yeah. Not only that, the bank has got a pledge on the apartment. There's a loan outstanding. Can the son continue to pay for the loan? And this is where Clement comes into the situation. Insurance can have some insurance policies to pay for the balance of the loan. Now, after you pay the balance of the loan, the transfer of the ownership to the son can only be done if you pay the UK taxes and stamp duty.
Yes.
So if the poor son hasn't got liquidity to pay off the existing bank loan, hasn't got the money to pay the UK tax, the son is in a situation whereby he probably cannot stay in that apartment anymore, right? So the intentions of the will of the father to provide him an accommodation and to bequeath that property to him
will never happen.
will never happen.
Not only is the son grieving, he's going to lose the roof on his
His
head
head.
in the UK.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
And
why.
on top of that, his long-term needs are also in limbo.
Yes.
What
All his
a
plan will
sad
not be able to be well executed
Yeah.
at all, right? Because it's lack of equality.
So we should also be thinking about the provision for stability of the ones who are left behind, isn't it?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
You know, we talked about the premature potential sale of the asset if one passes away. Again, we've seen so many cases. So let's say, for example, I own a 50% shares in a company that's part of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say you go under a will that says that 50% is going to be passed on or bequeathed to either my wife or my son.
Mm.
One needs to ask, does the wife or son know how to run the company or what to do with the 50% shares? What if, say, I bequeathed it to my 5-year-old son? Will my 5-year-old son now be the controlling shareholder of a company? Do they know what to do? What about my business partners? Would they respect that? So chances are the recipient, the wife or the son, may just want to sell and liquidate. There goes your family legacy. Well, under a trust, you can put that 50% stake in the family business under trust where you don't need to do the transfer of ownership. It falls under the trust. And whilst you're the settlor, you're still the beneficiary of that 50% stake in that company.
Same goes with structured distributions for all the other things and assets. And yes.
The simple difference between a will and a trust, and I'll say up front, not everyone needs a trust. I will recommend everyone, even in this room, make sure that you have the basics of having a will.
Yes.
Right? Under a will, in layman's term, is if my will says that when I die, asset 1 goes to beneficiary A, asset 2 goes to beneficiary C, whatever the case may be. It is a physical transfer after the probate is out to transfer the legal ownership of my assets to whoever's going to be the recipient beneficiary.
Right.
It's a complete transfer. Under a trust, you transfer all these assets under the trust.
Mm-hmm.
The trust now owns legally those assets. And if the assets have got income, like for example, property, you got rental income, shares in a company, whether it's listed or unlisted, you can get dividends. All that income flow goes up to the trust, and then you just have to distribute based on your letters of wishes and intent to the named beneficiaries. Whereas the ownership of the assets still stays under the trust rather than being transferred under the will directly.
Correct.
And this is where you prevent or you avoid any premature sale of those assets.
So it takes care of not just the structure, but also any instances of any ad hoc need to take from all of the wealth and assets that the person leaves behind.
Because once you transfer the assets under a will, there's no pulling back. You're 6 feet underground.
Yeah.
So whether the son receives the money transferred completely or assets, he goes buy a Ferrari. We're just joking about it in the room. Okay, there's nothing you can do. Or you transfer, you bequeath all your hard-earned assets to your wife, and God forbid your wife marries in 6 months' time. There's nothing you can do.
That's true. And there goes our next segment wherein we talk about continuity, right? So from the trustee's perspective, structuring for continuity is very, very key.
Yes.
And David, how many families consider trusts only at this stage? It might be too late, but it can never be too late. But then again, we know that in the past, people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And the lack of awareness is what was in the past. And now, what do you see?
So if we talk about continuity, the two type of assets that come to mind would be, say, the family home. You want that family home to be preserved within the family. The question is how many generations, right? The only way you can do that is you have to transfer that property under a trust, so that no one else, not even the beneficiaries, is allowed to sell, unless you, as the settlor, said only in 20 years' time sell. Then the distribution of the sale can then go to the bennies. Whereas under the will, straight away the title will be transferred to your named beneficiary. The other asset in terms of continuity I can think of is, like we mentioned earlier on, if you have a family business, whether it's created by the grandfather, great-grandfather, or even yourself, and you want to make sure that the control, which is the shares in that family business, doesn't get sold off prematurely, the only way is to do a trust. Because if you bequeath it to son A 20%, son B 20%, you have no control after your death what they can or cannot do with that 20% each. You can easily sell it off.
Yeah.
God forbid you sell it off to your competitors, and then you're rolling in your grave. All the hard work, suddenly your competitor has got control of your company that you created.
To touch on what David just mentioned, it just ring my mind. I just came across somebody who says that want to transfer the house to the children, right? To the son or to the daughter. Now, the question mark is that we have heard a lot of stories about this, that the moment you transfer the house to the children who is married with the wife and the in-laws, and next moment you're out on the street. So correctly put across. When you put into a trust, such thing can never happen because it is a protection. While you transfer it, right? You transfer it to trust, everybody can stay in.
True.
Right? It's not necessary must be transferred physically, transfer the name, ownership to your children.
So just to be clear, the beneficiaries are listed by the settlor. They don't own the assets.
Correct.
It is the trust that owns the assets. And it's the trustee that takes instructions in the form of a trustee from the settlor before he or she passes away. What do you want me to do with this asset? Right? It can be a staggered basis. The will cannot be staggered. The will simply says that after probate, please transfer from A to B, from the deceased to the recipient name in the will. After that, once the transfer happens, you have no more control.
That's right. And in the process of creating the trust, you then also educate the beneficiaries. That's also not just the passing on of the material and the assets, and you're also passing on your values and how you want them to take care of, how you want them to be the custodians and the stewards of what you have left behind.
Yeah, together with the family office, it's possible. I'm going to say this very crudely in the sense that, greed comes into play the moment the bigger the assets, the bigger the family, the bigger the disputes, right? And it's all a question of ownership. And, when one transfers to one person, the other party saying, why am I getting more or less? To the point that you raised just now. I'm a firm believer that under the trust, the Benny doesn't know who's getting what. Whereas under the will, after the probate is read, it's a public document. You can see from the probate who's getting A, B, C, or D, who's getting less, who's getting more, and where the list of assets. Under the trust is a confidential document.
Okay.
Right. So you could state in your trust deed that A is getting whatever, when, and how much.
I see.
B is getting A, B, C, or D. You could also state that A must not know what B is doing or receiving in this case. And this is where it relies on the trustee to make sure confidentiality is met.
I see. But don't you hear some of your clients that you serve? This process makes them feel like they're losing control, isn't it?
But it's not their control. It is the settler's control.
So how do you address that with them?
Well,
because they can't deny their feelings.
Yeah. Look, so really our client will be the settler before he or she passes away. And this is where independent trustees and experienced trustees will ask a lot of questions to the settler, to the client. Have you thought about if what this happens and A, B, or C? Have you thought about when you want to sell the asset? Have you thought about situations when you want to release more funds to the beneficiaries? Like, for example, son A turns 21, is going to university, release more money. Not just release every time. Or if a family member needs additional cash for a surgery, release more.
Right.
Or when everyone turns 40 years old, okay, then release everything. We have one case where it's stated very clearly, upon the death of the eldest son, sell everything under the trust.
Wow.
Who's going to sell it? Can you imagine if it was not under the trust, auntie and uncle and brothers and sisters going to fight as though who's going to get what and where to sell, how to sell.
That can happen.
This is where the trustee becomes, has his fiduciary obligations, make sure that, none of you gets involved because the asset is still under the trustee.
Yes.
The trustee says, upon the death, we sell everything and we distribute. No family office is going to do this. We have one last case where there was 87 beneficiaries and there was about 170 million worth of assets to be sold. It's going to be very complicated. The trustee's job is to make sure it sells the assets on the best price that we can get.
Yes.
We then approach all the 87 beneficiaries. Please give us your latest passport, your latest tax returns. Upon the sale of the assets in Singapore, we clear through the tax office for any tax, and then we write a check to 87 people.
Wow.
And then we close the deal.
And that's how you ensure continuity as
Yeah.
well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Would you be able to share certain families? I believe there will be not just junior or maybe young ones, but also there might be some cases wherein they have vulnerable family members.
Yeah. Vulnerable in a sense that, I'll give you one example. Mother, 5-year-old daughter,
Right.
divorced. Okay. If you put under a will that the 5-year-old daughter gets everything, do we know whether the 5-year-old daughter knows what to do? Or worst case, this is a divorce case, So if the wife passes away and the poor little daughter is left alone in this world, you would expect, even though you hate your ex-husband, to take custody of looking after the daughter. Guess what the husband's going to do, or ex-husband going to do? It's likely to look at the assets of the deceased wife. So,
oh my goodness.
setting up a trust enables you to make sure that the assets that the wife has can be bequeathed slowly over time when the daughter matures. But until then, the asset is under the trust, which the ex-husband can't touch. And you don't pass on assets that the recipient, the beneficiary, who's a minor, knows what to do or not what to do with it. Right?
Yeah, that's true. That's a very human aspect of how we deal with our clients and how we help them with their wealth transfer. Because as often as we want to really help them, if conversations are not started right now, then it's going to be even more of a challenge because it's not really just financial matter, right? Clement, I think they are very much relational at the core. So
Correct.
from your decades of experience, what differentiates a family to become successful in this process? And what do you observe are the things that families who struggle in this, what they can improve on?
Yeah. Correctly put across, like writing on what David has shared. If you notice that all the examples are all planned way ahead, right?
Yes.
You need to be planned way ahead because you don't wait for last minute urgency when you're sick, when you're not in a right sound of mind, and you start to panic, and that's where your options get very, very small, and you can't really have a proper structure. Now, the next will be more to like having a conversation in a very structured way, right? Talking to the family members, having a proper communication. Some even do like a family council, where they have ongoing every now and then. They have these meetings, making decisions. Be it whether with the together with the father, the mother, on company matters, bringing up that kind of competency among the children so that they can make decision in a very sound and also informative way. I have one customer who has shared with me before that he has done the trust, bringing the value, okay, to the children. In other words, is he is always wanting to do the education part, where he has been funding, doing charity within the community, funding those not so well-to-do families. At least their children get to a certain level, like say a university level. So that kind of values that he wants to bring it down to all his children, where they have to have that responsibility, the ownership of it, that they bring forth into many generations. And this kind of conversation needs to start early.
Right.
All right, it cannot be waiting at the last minute. And more importantly, it's like sometimes getting a professional advisor who has this kind of experience to come into the family to discuss, to share what other families do to have a very structured way, so that at any one time there will be no ambiguity, not very clear, don't know whether this or that, and document it down in a very, very structured way as well.
And guide them towards having a well-informed decision-making process together with the family in such meetings like this.
Yes, that's
But
correct. Yeah.
David, I mean, thanks for sharing, Clement. Do you find, David, that more and more families will be receptive to such a formal structure?
Yeah,
Governance?
I think so. We're seeing that trend happening. I just recalled last month we had a Singapore citizen person who's currently working in the United States.
Yeah.
And he's only at the age, if I remember correctly, early 40s.
Oh.
And he called our office with regards to inquiries about setting up a trust. I was taken back. He's 40 years old. So I asked him, may I ask, I'm very happy that you are asking the right questions and you're looking at seeking to set up a trust. May I ask why? He says, very simple. His parents went through a bitter fight with the family over the grandfather's money, right? He doesn't want that to happen to his current generation. And also, I think that there's more educational and there's more structures that are available. People are asked, as wealth increases, people are going to ask that third phase of wealth management. Okay, what am I going to do with that wealth?
Yes.
Right? And I think, us Asians, particularly Asians, the taboo of how dare you talk to me about death and the planning of death. I think it's still there. It's coming off. I think, with the advent that, when we do podcasts like this, people are more aware. There's the problem with this will, there's the issue of the trust and so forth. And I think post-COVID, everyone's traveling more, right? We do not know when there's the next Iran war where suddenly planes, can't fly and so forth. I think people are starting to realize that, I think it's starting better to plan early than to plan later.
Absolutely.
I agree. with
Yeah.
that.
Right.
I fully
And I'll show you one anecdotal evidence. 2 months back, someone called us up and says, "Can I come and see you? We want to set up a trust." And he was in his 70s, right? He said, "I'm bringing my partner," right? So he came to the office, but to our surprise, he was pulling an oxygen tank, yes.
Oh.
And then in between conversation, "I want to set up a trust." This is where, so we got to the talking, says, "Why is there a sudden need for setting up a trust?" He says, "I'm going for a lung transplant in India. And this is my life partner, and therefore she's going to be the beneficiary."
Mm.
My biggest worry was that, can I set up the trust in time before he goes for his surgery and if should anything happens?
Oh my dear.
So plan earlier rather than
Right.
later. Start asking the conversations with experts from Grandtag or people who my team. You don't have to make that decision now, but it takes a long time to make that decision. So you got to start the process early.
I actually agree with what David had just said. It also triggered my mind that recently I have also met a customer that he did not reveal that it happens to him before. That means his parents and siblings were fighting over it until when he met up with me, and after a few conversation, and he started revealing that why he wanted to do something about his overall planning. It is because he himself witnessed that kind of fights in the other generation. So something that plan early. And that's where he's also about 40 over years old as well. Yeah, interestingly.
And social media, every day you see all these horror stories about family fighting over, family assets and so forth. So that's good for us.
You guys are absolutely right, because here in Asia, wealth planning and wealth conversations will often include founder-led businesses, cultural sensitivities. Different parts of Asia will have their own as well, and unspoken hierarchies. So, Clement, maybe you can give an insight on how all these shape the great wealth transfer in our region?
Yes, it really resonates with me very, very closely because I traveled quite extensively and I cover a lot of Asian market. And some countries, is the culture, all right? The founder has done, in our generation, these are the second generation that build their wealth. They are very, very close to whatever they build and they feel very, very close to their heart. And
It's
and
precious
very,
to them.
very, very, very precious to them, and they find it very difficult to pass it down to the next generation because they still want to be in control, like what you shared earlier, right? And what exactly happened is that the second generation, they themselves, I mean, they are his one down, his children will try their very best. Some of them may be interested in their business, some may not. So again, this is the part where we are talking about the kind of culture. Some they don't like to talk about death. The word death to them is a taboo, right? Taboo, and also making decision. They want to always be in charge of the decision making, and the children have not much of decision making most of the time. They are not being exposed to the decision making, and more that a lot of times the children would not want to bring it up because of the cultural kind of to them it's like
Sensitivities.
inauspicious kind of thing. So they delay it. But we all know that by delaying it, it's not going to help. It's going to be too late for things to happen in the future, right? So again, the wealth part we are talking about, as you know, that a lot of entrepreneur property prices has gone up. The wealth is getting more and more, but the governance part is not aligned. The balance sheet is tilted tilted one side, and that is something that I felt that within the Asia, a lot of families are facing such a cultural kind of limitation that they face. Yep.
True. David, earlier you touched lightly on cross-border families being globally located and all. But can we just go towards the angle of sometimes the first generation, they're too attached, they're too precious about the wealth that they built. And then it creates a bottleneck in terms of transition. And sometimes because of these delays, the wealth keeps growing so much more faster than your decision making.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit on that?
As wealth grows,
Yes.
the other certainty is that we're going to die one day. Right? So the longer you delay and it's too late, what are you going to do about it? It comes back to the planning. It comes back to having the conversation as to, should I pass away, son A or B or C can run the company, but the shares is the important part. Trust is the simplest way, right? Because as the trustee, we only own the shares for and on behalf of the settler when he's alive. And when the settler passes on, unfortunately or fortunately, it's the trustee that has to make all the decisions with regards to the ownership. The continuity of running the company can still reside with the family.
Right.
That's where there's no conflict of interest. The asset that you have in terms of AUM with the bank, your family can still talk to the private banker in terms of what to invest in and so forth. It's just that ownership is done to the trust. And when you segregate the ownership from the bennies or the beneficiaries, maybe in theory that's less fighting because bennies tend to fight. They say, I want more or I want less. Chances is I want more. Okay? More of what?
Right.
You don't own the asset. It's the trust. Papa said to put the assets under the trust. Papa said that the interest or the income from the assets can be distributed according to his intentions and wishes, not yours.
Right. That's true.
Right?
Yes.
And now let's come to a full circle. Because as for what did we discussed, we realized that, it's not just, it doesn't end with wealth transfer. It has to be, after that, it's wealth transformation, isn't it?
Okay.
So if we were to leave nugget of inspiration or something for our dear viewers here to, have as a key takeaway, what is one guiding principle for them to remember and keep in mind? David, let's start with you.
I would say start your legacy planning as early as possible. And at least have the basics of at least a will. If not, set up a trust. There are the benefits of pros and cons between will and the trust. And when you write your will or when you do your trust deed, have very good clarity as to what your intentions are. It's the settlor that owns the asset. The settlor has the right to say who is going to get what, in what manner, when. Right? So that's, I think, the most important. And then once you have that frame of mind of starting to plan, if you decide to choose a trust setup, I would say you got to decide that which jurisdiction. Is it Singapore? Is it Hong Kong? Is it Malaysia? Or is it New Zealand? Pick the right jurisdiction that suits your family needs. Right? And I suppose the last one is choose the right trustee, because at the end of the day, is the trustee is going to own your assets.
Absolutely.
And going to be legal guardian.
Yeah.
Agree.
So it's not just about the transfer of capital, it's what this wealth really means to the family.
Right.
Clement?
Yes. For me, plan early, right? Don't wait until when you're sick or when there's urgency, then you start planning. Along with what David have just shared, right? Along the way, family members start growing, getting married, moving around different jurisdiction. And that's where it is important that a proper structure, all right, structure it deliberately and make sure that there is a proper structure, the family intention, right, the original intention, what are the priorities and what are the long-term goals. Last but not least is review it regularly because things change. The world is moving every day, right? And you will never know when it's the next war, or what is going to be the next pandemic that's coming in. And do review it regularly together with the families every now and then, having a proper governance and give them an opportunity to make decision. because ultimately they are the one who is going to carry on your wishes, right? How you want the family tree to grow and also the assets to move on, to pass down to generation after generation, and also the values that you want them to be responsible for, the stewardship that you want them to move on after your death. That's what
Yes.
exactly it is.
Thank you so much. All these are very, very resonating, not just to me, not just to us, but to all our viewers. So, what today's discussion makes clear is that the great wealth transfer is not a distant event, it is already underway. Families that prepare thoughtfully, integrating liquidity planning, governance frameworks, and trustee structures, stand the best chance of preserving not just the assets, but unity. At Grandtag, we believe wealth is never just about accumulation, it is about stewardship. Clement, David, thank you so much for such
Pleasure.
a thoughtful and grounded sharing. Discussion today is very, very precious. Let's start the conversations with our families, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on the Grandtag podcast, Conversations on Wealth and Legacy. If today's discussion resonated with you, we encourage you to begin these conversations within your own families, because legacy is built intentionally, not accidentally. And if you found this conversation valuable, do subscribe to the Grandtag podcast on YouTube and Spotify, and follow our social media channels for more practical conversations around wealth, legacy, and stewardship. I'm Barbara, signing off, and we look forward to having you with us in our next episode of the Grandtag podcast, Conversations on Wealth and Legacy.